Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world of blue eyeshadow, frosted lips, and enough Aquanet to power a small rocket. We're talking about 1970s American women's makeup, specifically why it felt so different from what we wear today. The colours were bolder, the application was heavier, and the whole philosophy behind putting on your face was built on ideas about beauty that have quietly shifted beneath our feet over the past 50 years. Before we dive in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these little trips through history. And thank you, truly, to the person who suggested this topic. Your suggestions shape everything we do here, and I'm so grateful you're part of this community. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I know someone out there is listening at 2:43 a.m, propped up on pillows, wondering if they should get up or just accept that sleep has filed for divorce. Also, the channel is now live on Spotify. If you want to listen there, the link is in the description. No pressure, just another way to drift through these stories if that works better for you. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise breeze, wiggle down under your blanket, and get comfortable. Really comfortable. Like the kind of comfortable where moving feels like a philosophical debate you're not prepared to have. Because tonight we're exploring a decade when makeup wasn't subtle, when eyeshadow came in shades called Electric Lagoon and Midnight Disco, when blush sat on your cheeks like little circles of determination, when women carried compacts the size of small novels and lipstick in colours that defied nature. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to stand at a drugstore makeup counter in 1974, staring at a wall of choices that all seemed to whisper, "Get bold," or "Go home"? What did it feel like to apply makeup every morning with techniques passed down from your mother, your older sister, your best friend's cousin, who once worked at a department store cosmetics counter? Did women actually like the way their makeup looked? Or were they simply following the current, doing what beauty magazines told them was correct? How much time did it take to blend frosted eyeshadow across your lids before work? And what did it mean to feel beautiful in a decade when beauty had very specific, very rigid rules? And just like that, it is 1975. The morning light filters through your curtains. Your makeup bag sits on the bathroom counter, zipped and ready. The eyeshadow section is where things get interesting. Small plastic palettes hang from metal hooks, each one containing 2 or 3 shades pressed into tiny pans. The colours are bold, unapologetic, electric blue, emerald green, purple that looks like it was scraped from the surface of a disco ball. There's nothing subtle here, nothing that whispers. These colours announce themselves, they declare intentions, and somehow, in 1975, this is what beauty looks like. You pick up a palette, turn it over, read the names printed on the back. Smoky Sapphire, Jade Dream, Midnight Velvet. The names sound like romance novels or exotic destinations, places you'll never visit but can imagine while standing in a drugstore on a Saturday afternoon, trying to decide which version of yourself you want to become. Lipstick occupies an entire spinning rack, a carousel of small tubes organised by brand, then by colour family. You spin it slowly, watching the shades blur past. Pinks, corals, reds, browns, and then the frosted shades, those strange shimmering colours that catch the light like tiny disco balls. Frosted rose, frosted peach, frosted mocha. You reach for one, twist the base until the lipstick emerges, study it under the unforgiving fluorescent glow. It looks both beautiful and slightly alien, a colour that doesn't quite exist in nature but somehow works on human lips. Other women browse nearby, their own hands reaching for compacts, their own faces showing the same mixture of hope and confusion. A teenage girl stands at the Mascara display, reading the back of a package with the intensity of someone decoding ancient scripture. An older woman compares 2 shades of nail polish, holding them up to the light, squinting. A mother shepherds 2 children past the candy aisle, glancing longingly at the lipsticks as she passes. You make your selections, a foundation that might be close, an eyeshadow palette that feels daring, a lipstick that promises to make you look pulled together, confident, modern. You carry them to the register, pay with bills from your wallet, and walk back through those automatic doors into the afternoon sunlight, holding a small paper bag that contains, you hope, some version of beauty that will make sense when you get home. The 1970s had a very specific relationship with colour, and that relationship was loud. Eyeshadow came in shades of blue so bright they could signal aircraft, greens that looked like they were borrowed from peacock feathers, purples that sat on your eyelids like small shimmering bruises. These weren't subtle suggestions of colour, these were declarations. The blues came in every variation imaginable. Sky blue, which was actually more aggressive than any sky you'd ever seen. Turquoise, which looked tropical and vaguely alarming. Navy, which was somehow still bright. Sapphire, which shimmered. And the ever-popular powder blue, a shade that appeared on eyelids across America with such frequency that it became almost a uniform, a signal that you understood what beauty meant in this particular decade. You wore these colours without irony. You sat at your vanity in the morning, dipped your applicator into the small pan of blue shadow, and swept it across your eyelid from lash line to brow bone. The effect was immediate and undeniable. Your eyes looked bigger, brighter, more awake. Or at least, that's what the magazines promised. In reality, your eyes looked very blue, which was either exactly what you wanted or something you learned to accept as the price of being fashionable. Green came in second place on the popularity scale. Emerald green for evening. Mint green for daytime if you were feeling adventurous. Olive green if you wanted something that felt earthy, natural, connected to the broader countercultural movements happening around you. You paired green eyeshadow with brown eyeliner, or sometimes black, and the combination created a look that photographs from the era struggle to explain to people who weren't there. Purple occupied a strange middle ground between elegant and experimental. Plum shades looked sophisticated, almost regal, especially when paired with the right lipstick. Lavender looked soft, feminine, surprisingly wearable, despite being, fundamentally, lavender eyeshadow on a human eyelid. Violet looked bold, dramatic, the kind of colour you wore when you wanted to be noticed across a crowded room. And then there was brown. Not the neutral, everyday brown of later decades. This was brown with ambition. Chocolate brown. Copper brown. Bronze brown that shimmered like metallic paint. These shades were considered natural, even though they sat on your eyelids in thick, obvious layers that caught every light source within a 3-foot radius. The lipstick colours followed a similar philosophy. Pale, frosted shades dominated, but there were also deeper options, wines and berries and browns that looked almost orange under certain lighting. You matched your lipstick to your outfit, or to your mood, or to whatever the sales clerk at the department store had convinced you looked flattering during a consultation you hadn't asked for but appreciated anyway. Blush came in shades that range from soft pink to aggressive coral, to something the packaging called Sunset Glow, which was less a colour and more an optimistic description of what your cheeks might look like if you had recently completed a marathon or experienced a particularly surprising piece of news. The colours weren't mistakes, they weren't accidents, they were choices, deliberate and confident, made by cosmetics companies that understood their customers wanted boldness, wanted visibility, wanted to announce their presence in a world that often asked women to be quieter, smaller, less noticeable. The makeup of the 70s said, loudly and in shimmering blue, "I am here. I am wearing eyeshadow. I have no apologies to offer about it." You stood in front of your mirror, your eyelids painted in colours that would seem absurd in hindsight, but felt absolutely correct in the moment, and you walked out into the world wearing them proudly, And somehow, in a way that's hard to explain to people who didn't live through it, that felt like power. Foundation in the 70s was thick. Not thick like today's full coverage foundations that blend seamlessly. Thick like you were spackling a wall. The goal wasn't to enhance your natural skin. The goal was to create an entirely new surface, smooth, matte, and as close to porcelain as chemistry would allow. The bottles were heavy, glass or thick plastic, filled with liquid that had the consistency of paint. You shook the bottle before each use, hearing the formula shift and settle inside. Then you poured a small amount onto your palm or onto a damp sponge if you were feeling sophisticated, and began the process of application. You started at the centre of your face and worked outward, spreading the foundation across your forehead, down your nose, over your cheeks, along your jawline. The formula didn't absorb into your skin. It sat on top of it, creating a layer, a mask, a new face that covered everything underneath. Pores disappeared, redness vanished, freckles, those small brown marks that some women found charming and others found unfortunate, were obliterated completely. The coverage was absolute. If you had a blemish, a scar, any imperfection at all, you simply applied more foundation until it disappeared beneath the weight of the formula. The result was a face that looked smooth, uniform, almost unnaturally perfect. Your skin tone became one consistent shade from hairline to jawline, with no variation, no dimension, no hint that beneath all this coverage was actual human skin with texture and colour variations. The finish was matte, aggressively matte. Any natural oils your skin produced throughout the day were immediately absorbed by the thick layer of foundation, or else they broke through in small, shiny patches that required immediate attention with powder. Dewy skin, glowing skin, skin that looked alive and hydrated. These weren't goals in the 70s. The goal was matte perfection. Skin that looked like it had been professionally photographed even when you were just standing in line at the grocery store. Choosing the right shade was nearly impossible. The drugstore offered maybe 6 options, ranging from ivory to tan, with very little accommodation for the vast spectrum of human skin tones in between. If you were pale, you bought ivory and hoped it didn't make you look like a ghost. If you had any colour at all, you bought natural beige and accepted that natural was a relative term. If you were darker than tan, you were mostly out of luck, left to mix shades, or simply go without. Another reminder that the beauty industry in the 70s had a very narrow definition of who deserved to feel beautiful. The application tools were basic. Most women used their fingers, blending the foundation into their skin with small circular motions, feeling the thick formula spread and settle. Some used sponges, small triangular wedges that absorbed half the product before any of it reached your face. A few women, the ones who read beauty magazines religiously, used foundation brushes, though these were harder to find and required cleaning after each use, which felt like an unreasonable amount of effort for something that was supposed to make your life easier. The foundation didn't just cover your face, it transferred onto everything. Your collar, your phone receiver, your husband's shoulder when he hugged you, the edge of your coffee cup. Tissues came away from your face stained with beige. Pillowcases developed faint tan stains that never quite washed out completely. You learned to be careful, to avoid touching your face, to press rather than rub, to accept that this thick, persistent coverage was simply part of being a woman who cared about her appearance. And underneath it all, beneath the layers of foundation and powder and more foundation applied throughout the day to maintain the illusion, your actual skin struggled. It couldn't breathe. It couldn't regulate itself. It broke out in small rebellions, tiny bumps and clogged pores that required even more foundation to cover, creating a cycle that no one talked about but everyone experienced. Still you wore it. Because going without foundation felt like going outside without pants. Unthinkable. Inappropriate. a breach of the unspoken contract that said women should present polished, perfected versions of themselves to the world, even if that perfection required spackling your face every single morning. If there was one makeup trend that defined the decade, it was frosted lips. Not glossy, not creamy. Frosted, as if someone had taken your lipstick and rolled it through tiny particles of glitter and ice, and pure 1970s optimism. Women wore these shades everywhere, to work, to the grocery store, to PTA meetings, to dinner dates where the lighting was so dim you couldn't see your own reflection anyway. The effect was unmistakable. Your lips caught the light in a way that lips normally didn't. They shimmered, they sparkled, they announced themselves before you even opened your mouth to speak. In photographs from the era, women's lips gleam with a frosty shine that looks almost metallic, like someone applied a very thin layer of aluminum foil and hoped for the best. The colours themselves were often pale, frosted pink, frosted peach, frosted mauve, shades that, without the frost, would have been soft and understated. But the shimmer transformed them into something else entirely, something that demanded attention, that refused to be ignored. You wore these lipsticks with confidence because everyone wore them, because the magazines featured them, because the television commercials promised they would make you look modern, youthful, impossibly glamorous. Application required a steady hand and lower expectations than you might have for a cream lipstick. The formula was often dry, almost chalky, with particles of shimmer suspended throughout that never quite distributed evenly. You twisted up the tube, swept the colour across your bottom lip, pressed your lips together to transfer it to the top lip, and then check the mirror to make sure the shimmer hadn't settled into the tiny lines around your mouth, creating what beauty editors politely called texture concerns. The frost came in different intensities. Some lipsticks had just a hint of shimmer, a subtle glow that caught the light only when you turned your head at certain angles. Others were aggressively frosted, packed with so much shimmer that your lips looked like they'd been dipped in glitter glue. The level of frost you chose said something about you, though what exactly it said varied depending on who was looking and what their own relationship with frosted lipstick happened to be. The trend wasn't limited to lipstick. There were frosted lip glosses, thick and sticky, that you applied over your lipstick for extra shimmer, and a surface so reflective you could theoretically check your makeup in your own lips. There were frosted lip crayons, twist-up pencils that eliminated the need for a separate lip liner, but created their own set of application challenges. There were even frosted lipsticks with names like Diamond Dust and Crystal Shimmer and Stardust, names that suggested your lips weren't just lips but tiny galaxies of light and colour. Men had opinions about frosted lipstick. Some found it attractive, modern, a sign that a woman cared about her appearance and kept up with current trends. Others found it confusing, occasionally commenting that your lips looked wet even when they weren't, or asking if you'd gotten into your daughter's art supplies. You smiled and ignored these comments because your lips looked exactly the way they were supposed to look, which was frosted. The practical challenges were significant. Frosted lipstick transferred onto everything. Your coffee cup bore a shimmering ring after each sip. Your napkin, when you dabbed your lips after a meal, came away sparkling like a small oily disco ball. When you kissed someone, you left behind a faint shimmer on their cheek or lips, evidence of the encounter that required explanation if the someone in question wasn't your husband. Touch-ups throughout the day became ritual. You excused yourself from your desk, walked to the bathroom, pulled out your compact and your frosted lipstick, and carefully reapplied, blotting with tissue, checking your teeth to make sure no shimmer had migrated there during lunch. The maintenance was constant but accepted as part of the price of beauty, of keeping up appearances, of presenting yourself as a woman who had her life together even when your life was in fact falling apart in small, manageable increments. By the end of the day, your lips felt dry, slightly tight, coated in a thin layer of waxy shimmer that no longer looked quite as glamorous as it had that morning. You wiped it off with cold cream or makeup remover, watching the tissue come away streaked with pale, sparkly colour, revealing your actual lips underneath, slightly chapped and relieved to be free. And yet, the next morning, you applied it again. Because frosted lips were what women wore in the 70s. Because your mother wore frosted lipstick. Because your friends wore frosted lipstick. Because walking into the world with bare, unfrosted lips felt like showing up to a party empty-handed. Technically allowed, but socially questionable. Blush in the 70s wasn't blended, it was placed. You took your brush, dipped it into a compact of powder that ranged from soft pink to aggressive coral, and you applied it in 2 round circles on the apples of your cheeks. The effect was less naturally flushed and more, I've enthusiastically embraced rouge as a concept. The placement was precise, almost mathematical. You smiled at yourself in the mirror, watching your cheeks rise, identifying the highest point, the apple, the spot where the blush was meant to live. Then you pressed your brush against that spot and swept it in small circular motions, building colour, creating a defined circle of pigment that sat on your cheek like a stamp, like proof that you had completed this particular step of your makeup routine correctly. The colour didn't fade gently into your skin. It had edges, clear, visible boundaries where the blush stopped and your foundation-covered face began. Some women tried to blend, using clean brushes or their fingertips to soften the transition, but the powders of the era didn't blend easily. They sat where you put them, stubborn and bright, announcing their presence with confidence. The shades were cheerful, optimistic, occasionally alarming. Baby pink for a soft feminine look, coral for something brighter, more energetic, rose for sophistication, peach for warmth. And then there were the deeper shades, plums and berries that looked dramatic in the compact but somehow even more dramatic on your face, especially under fluorescent office lighting that seemed designed specifically to make blush look either invisible or radioactive with no middle ground. The application tools varied. Some women used the small brushes that came with the compact thin bristles that barely held any product and required multiple dips to achieve the desired intensity. Others invested in larger, fluffier brushes from the drugstore or department store. Tools that promised professional results but mostly just made the circles bigger. A few women, either out of desperation or innovation, applied blush with their fingertips, pressing the powder directly onto their cheeks, accepting that precision was impossible but colour was achievable. The amount of blush you wore sent signals. Too little, and you looked washed out, pale, possibly ill or tired or experiencing some personal crisis that made your co-workers ask if you were feeling okay. Too much, and you looked like a doll, a clown, someone who didn't understand the subtle art of makeup application. The sweet spot was narrow, and finding it required practice, trial, error, and a willingness to accept that some days you simply looked more flushed than others. Teenagers wore blush with particular enthusiasm, applying it in thick, bright circles that horrified their mothers but delighted their friends. The look said youthful, energetic, unconcerned with subtlety. Older women wore less, softer shades applied with lighter hands, aiming for the kind of gentle flush that suggested health and vitality without screaming, "I am wearing circular stamps of pink powder on my face." The blush didn't stay put all day. By afternoon, the circles had faded, absorbed into your foundation, or simply worn away by gravity, friction, the natural oils your skin produced despite the matte finish you'd worked so hard to achieve. You touched up in the bathroom, reapplying over your existing makeup, layering circle upon circle, until you weren't entirely sure where the original blush ended and the touch-up began. Some women carried their blush compact everywhere, tucked into purses alongside lipstick and powder and a small mirror. Others relied on the bathroom mirrors at work, at restaurants, at their friends' houses, applying blush under unfamiliar lighting that made colour matching feel like a game of chance you were destined to lose. The texture varied by brand and price point. Drugstore blushes were often chalky, requiring significant pressure to pick up colour on your brush. Department store blushes felt silkier, more pigmented, easier to work with but also easier to over-apply, which meant the expensive products came with their own set of challenges. You learned through experience, through mistakes, through days when you caught your reflection in a car window and realised your blush circles were visible from orbit. But here's what no one talks about. The circles were comforting in their own way. They were predictable. They were controllable. In a decade of social change and economic uncertainty, and shifting expectations about what women could be and do, your 2 round circles of blush were constants. Small spots of colour you could create and control, proof that at least your cheeks were exactly where you wanted them to be. Eyebrows in the 70s were thin, not artfully thin, not carefully shaped, just thin, plucked into narrow arcs that followed a trajectory somewhere between surprised and sceptical. Women stood in front of mirrors with tweezers, removing hair one strand at a time, chasing an ideal that magazines promised would make them look sophisticated, elegant, eternally youthful. The plucking happened in bathrooms, bedrooms, anywhere with good lighting and a magnifying mirror, if you were lucky enough to own one. You gripped the tweezers, leaned close to the mirror, found a hair that seemed out of place and pulled. The small, sharp pain was immediate but brief. You blinked, examined your work, found another hair, pulled again. The process was meditative, repetitive, oddly satisfying in the way that small acts of self-improvement often are, even when the improvement is debatable. The goal was a thin, arched brow that opened up your eyes and gave your face a lifted, alert appearance. You plucked from underneath, creating a clean line that followed the natural arch of your brow bone but with much less hair. You plucked from above if stray hairs dared to grow there, eliminating them swiftly. You plucked from the inner corners, creating space between your brows that beauty editors insisted made you look less severe, more approachable, less likely to be mistaken for someone who had strong opinions about politics. The benchmarks for thin enough shifted over time. At the beginning of the decade, eyebrows retained some presence, some weight. By the middle years, they'd narrowed considerably. By the late 70s, some women's eyebrows had become almost theoretical, thin lines of hair that required eyebrow pencil just to be visible from across a room. You used an eyebrow pencil to fill in gaps, to extend the arch, to create the shape you wanted but nature hadn't provided. The pencils were hard, waxy, requiring significant pressure to deposit any colour. You made small, light strokes trying to mimic the appearance of individual hairs, though the result often looked more like you'd drawn on your eyebrows with a crayon, which technically you had. The colours were limited. Brown for brunettes, a slightly different brown for everyone else. Some brave souls used black eyebrow pencils, creating stark, dramatic brows that looked striking in photographs but sometimes alarming in person. Blondes faced a particular challenge, needing brows dark enough to be visible but light enough to look natural, a balance that required careful selection and occasional regret. Mistakes were permanent, or at least semi-permanent. If you plucked too much, if you got carried away in pursuit of the perfect arch, if you accidentally created a bald spot or made one eyebrow significantly thinner than the other, you were stuck with it. Eyebrow hair grows back slowly, grudgingly, often in strange patterns that don't match the original. You learn to be conservative, to pluck carefully, to stop before you went too far. though how far was too far remained unclear until you'd already crossed that invisible line. Some women never recovered from 70s plucking. Years of aggressive tweezing damaged the hair follicles permanently, leaving them with sparse, patchy brows that required constant penciling for the rest of their lives. This consequence wasn't discussed in beauty magazines, wasn't mentioned by the older women who taught you how to pluck, wasn't something you considered while standing in your bathroom removing hair with determined efficiency. The thin brow look extended to all ages. Teenagers plucked their eyebrows thin before they'd even finished growing in completely. Middle-aged women maintained the thin brows they'd established in their youth. Even older women, who'd come of age in eras with fuller brows, often adapted to the current trend, plucking away years of growth to achieve the narrow arch that 1975 demanded. Eyebrow maintenance was constant. You plucked every few days, removing new growth, maintaining the shape you'd created. You carried tweezers in your purse for emergencies, for moments when you caught your reflection and spotted a stray hair that absolutely could not wait until you got home. You plucked in your car, in restaurant bathrooms once, memorably, during a boring movie when the theatre was dark enough that you hoped no one would notice. The relationship between you and your eyebrows was complicated. You wanted them thin because that's what beauty required. But you also missed the fuller brows of your childhood, the natural shape that had existed before you started plucking, the eyebrows that required no maintenance and somehow looked exactly right without any intervention. That version of your eyebrows was gone now, removed one hair at a time, and getting them back would require years of patience and a willingness to look unfashionable while they grew. So you kept plucking, because thin eyebrows were modern, because your friends had thin eyebrows, because anything else looked dated, old-fashioned, like you'd missed the memo about what women's faces were supposed to look like in this particular decade. Mascara came in small tubes with wands that resembled miniature brushes dipped in tar. The formula was thick, often clumpy, and applying it required patience, precision, and a willingness to accept that your lashes might stick together in small, spiky clusters. But that was fine. That was the look. Big, bold, dramatically defined lashes that announced themselves from across the room. You unscrewed the cap, pulled out the wand, watched the thick black or brown formula cling to the bristles in generous, slightly alarming globs. Then you positioned the wand at the base of your upper lashes and swept upward, wiggling slightly to coat each lash, to separate them as much as the thick formula allowed, to create the kind of dramatic fringe that magazines featured on their covers. The first coat went on heavy. The second coat, which you applied after giving the first 30 seconds to dry, went on even heavier. By the third coat, your lashes had transformed into thick, dark spikes that looked nothing like the natural lashes underneath, but everything like the beauty ideal of the moment. Length, volume, drama. Definition so extreme that your eyes looked twice their normal size, framed by lashes that could theoretically be spotted from space. The formula dried stiff. Your lashes held their shape, curled upward in determined arcs that defied gravity and common sense. You blinked carefully, aware that your lashes now had weight, substance, a physical presence that required adjustment. Sometimes they hit your brow bone. Sometimes they grazed your eyelid when you looked down. Sometimes they stuck together mid-blink, requiring delicate separation with your fingertip or, in desperate situations, a clean mascara wand used as comb. Clumping wasn't a problem. Clumping was inevitable. The thick formula naturally clustered on your lashes, binding multiple lashes together into single, thicker units that looked intentional rather than accidental. You didn't try to prevent clumping. You worked with it, used it, accepted it as part of the aesthetic. Some women even encouraged clumping, applying coat after coat until their lashes resembled tiny, black-fringed fans. The colours were straightforward. Black for everyone with dark hair and most people with light hair who wanted drama. Brown for blondes and redheads who wanted something slightly softer but still obvious. Blue mascara existed, marketed as a way to make the whites of your eyes look brighter, and some women wore it regularly while others tried it once and decided it made them look like they'd gotten into their daughter's craft supplies. Waterproof formulas promised to survive tears, rain, swimming pools, emotional breakdowns in restaurant bathrooms. The promise was mostly true, but the cost was removal. Waterproof mascara clung to your lashes like it had signed a lease, requiring aggressive scrubbing with oil-based removers and cotton pads, and occasionally just time and prayer. Regular mascara was easier to remove but also easier to smudge, creating dark shadows under your eyes by mid-afternoon that required strategic powder application to conceal. Application accidents were common. You'd be coating your lashes, concentrating, breathing carefully, and then you'd blink too soon or move the wand too quickly, and suddenly there was a dark smudge on your eyelid, your brow bone, the bridge of your nose. You'd grab a cotton swab, dip it in makeup remover or just lick it slightly because you were in a hurry, and carefully remove the mistake, trying not to disturb the eyeshadow you'd already applied, trying not to create a worse problem than the one you were solving. The mascara wand itself was a tool of imprecision. The bristles were stiff, unyielding, designed seemingly by someone who had never actually applied mascara to a human eye. You learned to angle the wand, to rotate it slightly, to use just the tip for your lower lashes and the full brush for your upper lashes. You learned through trial and error, through days when your lashes looked perfect, and days when they looked like you'd applied your mascara while riding a bicycle over cobblestones. Lower lashes presented their own challenges. The wands were too big, too clumsy, designed for upper lashes where there was room to maneuver. But beauty required lower lash mascara too, so you held the wand vertically, used just the tip, carefully touched each tiny lower lash while trying not to smudge mascara onto your lower lid or cheek. Success rate, variable. By the end of the day, your mascara had begun its slow migration. Small flakes dotted your cheeks. Dark smudges appeared under your eyes where your lashes had touched your skin. The careful curl you'd created that morning had relaxed slightly, your lashes now pointing more outward than upward, still dramatic but tired, like actors at the end of a long performance who haven't quite broken character yet but are definitely ready to go home. You removed it at night with cold cream or makeup remover, watching the dark streaks dissolve and run down your face like tiny rivers of determination. Your lashes emerged from under the layers, thin and pale and surprisingly short without their daily armour. They looked vulnerable, unfinished, like they were waiting for tomorrow morning when you'd coat them again in thick, clumpy darkness and send them back out into the world to do their job. Eyeliner in the 70s was not a suggestion. It was a commitment. Women lined their eyes top and bottom with dark pencils or liquid formulas that dried into place and stayed there until you scrubbed them off with cold cream and determination. The goal was definition, drama, a frame around your eyes that said, "Yes, I am here, and yes, I am wearing eyeliner about it." You started with your upper lid. Stretching your eyelid taut with one hand, you drew a line with the other, starting at the inner corner and sweeping outward toward your temple. The line was thick, not a delicate trace but a substantial band of black or brown that followed your lash line and then extended slightly past it, creating a small wing or flick that lifted the outer corner of your eye. This wing wasn't subtle, it was visible. It was intentional. It was absolutely required. The lower lid came next. You pulled your lower lid down slightly, exposing the inner rim, and drew another line, this one following the curve of your lower lashes. The effect was enclosure, your eyes now fully framed in dark colour, defined and dramatic and impossible to ignore. Some women stopped at the lash line. Others, bolder or more committed to the aesthetic, applied eyeliner to the waterline itself, that wet inner edge where eyeliner absolutely should not go but often did anyway. The tools varied. Pencils were most common, wooden or twist-up sticks with waxy tips that required sharpening, or, in the case of twist-ups, strategic rotating to expose fresh product. You pressed the pencil against your lid, applying pressure, dragging it across your skin, feeling the slight resistance as the wax transferred from stick to eyelid. The line wasn't always smooth. Sometimes it skipped. Sometimes it caught on a tiny bit of dry skin and stopped completely, requiring you to start again, to layer more product, to build up enough colour that the skip disappeared. Liquid eyeliner offered precision but demanded steadiness. The applicator was thin, sometimes just a tiny brush, sometimes a felt tip pen. You dipped it into the bottle, wiped off the excess against the rim, and then attempted to draw a straight line across your moving, breathing, occasionally watering eyelid. The learning curve was steep. The mistakes were dramatic. Too much pressure, and the line became a blob. Too little, and nothing transferred. If your hand shook even slightly, the line wobbled, creating a wave pattern that you either accepted or removed and started over, depending on how much time you had and how much you cared about symmetry. The colour was almost always black, not charcoal, not dark brown pretending to be black, just black, absolute and unforgiving. Brown eyeliner existed for women who wanted something softer, but black was the standard, the expectation, the colour that provided maximum drama and definition. Some women used navy blue, which was supposed to make brown eyes look more vibrant, but mostly just looked like you were wearing navy blue eyeliner. Symmetry was the impossible dream. You lined one eye, checking it in the mirror, satisfied with the thickness, the angle, the slight upward flick at the outer corner. Then you lined the other eye, trying to recreate exactly what you'd just done, and somehow the second eye never quite matched the first. One wing was higher, one line was thicker, one flick extended further. You made adjustments, adding more liner to the thinner side, trying to balance them, but balance proved elusive. Most days you settled for close enough and moved on to mascara before you could overthink it. The eyeliner didn't just define your eyes, it also migrated. By mid-afternoon, the careful lines you'd drawn had begun to soften, to smudge, to transfer onto your upper lid, where it created a shadow that hadn't been there at breakfast. You checked your reflection in the bathroom mirror and discovered small dark smudges under your eyes, evidence that your lower liner had travelled south, taking up residence in the fine lines beneath your lashes. Touch-ups required either accepting the smudges as smoky eyes before smoky eyes became intentional, or removing the smudged liner and reapplying, a process that disturbed your eyeshadow and required additional repairs that often made everything worse. Most women chose acceptance, occasionally using a cotton swab to clean up the worst migrations, but otherwise letting the liner do whatever it wanted after 10 a.m, because fighting it required more energy than they had available. Some women developed techniques for making liner last longer. They applied eyeshadow over the liner to set it. They used primer underneath. They chose waterproof formulas that promised not to budge, though budging seemed to be eyeliner's primary function regardless of what the packaging claimed. They carried eyeliner pencils in their purses for emergency repairs, for moments when they caught their reflection and realised they looked less like a glamorous woman wearing dramatic eyeliner and more like someone who'd been crying, even though they absolutely hadn't. The heavily lined eye was everywhere in the 70s. Every movie star wore it. Every magazine cover featured it. Every woman you passed on the street had dark rings around her eyes, intentional and bold. It was the look, the signature, the thing that marked you as someone who understood current beauty standards and was willing to spend 10 minutes every morning drawing on your face to prove it. Every woman carried a compact. It sat in her purse alongside her wallet, her keys, her lipstick, and possibly a pack of gum that had been there since 1972. The compact was essential, not optional. You used it to check your reflection, to dab powder across your nose when it started to shine, to reapply blush when the circles faded. The compacts themselves were small, portable, often made of plastic designed to look expensive but fooling no one. Some had mirrors inside the lid, useful for quick checks in restaurants, parking lots, anywhere you couldn't access a proper bathroom mirror. Others were just pressed powder in a shallow pan with a small foam puff tucked inside, the puff compressed and slightly stained from weeks of use. You flipped open the compact with a satisfying small click, checked your reflection in whatever lighting was available, and assessed the situation. Had your foundation started to break down? Was your nose shiny? Had the morning's careful matte finish transformed into something closer to an oil slick? If yes to any of these, you reached for your compact and began the repair work. The powder inside was pressed, firm, requiring a bit of pressure to pick up product on your puff or brush. You tapped it against your skin, starting at your nose where shine always appeared first, moving outward to your cheeks, your forehead, your chin. The powder absorbed the oil, restored the matte finish, temporarily fixed whatever damage the day had inflicted on your carefully constructed face. The shade matching was approximate at best. Your compact powder was usually lighter than your foundation, or darker, or slightly the wrong undertone, because finding a perfect match required either luck or access to a department store counter stuffed by someone who knew what they were doing. So you made do, applying powder that didn't quite match, creating a slightly chalky finish that looked acceptable in dim lighting, but revealed its imperfections under fluorescent bulbs. Touch-ups happened throughout the day. In the bathroom at work, standing at the sink while your co-workers washed their hands, you pulled out your compact and dabbed powder across your face, creating small clouds of dust that drifted down onto your clothes, the counter, the floor. During lunch, sitting in your car before heading back to the office, you checked your face in the rearview mirror and made adjustments. In the restaurant bathroom before your date arrived, you refreshed everything, powder and blush and lipstick, transforming yourself from slightly melted to camera ready in under 3 minutes. The bathroom mirrors at restaurants, gas stations and department stores became familiar checkpoints. You knew which ones had good lighting and which ones made you look either corpse-like or orange, depending on the particular bulb the establishment had chosen. You adjusted your technique accordingly, applying less powder in harshly lit bathrooms, more powder in dim ones, always trying to strike the balance between covered and cakey. Some compacts had additional features, blush in a separate compartment, a small lipstick tucked into a hidden slot, a comb folded into the compact spine. These combination compacts promised convenience, everything you needed for touch-ups contained in one portable package. In practice, they meant you carried a compact the size of a small brick, heavy and awkward, but at least you had options. The powder puff that came with most compacts was barely functional. Small, thin, about as absorbent as a piece of cardboard, it picked up minimal product and deposited even less. Women learned to press hard, to use multiple pats to achieve any coverage, or they abandoned the puff entirely and brought their own brush, a small retractable one that lived in their purse and emerged during touch-up emergencies. Pressed powder had a shelf life measured in patience rather than months. Eventually, the surface developed a hard film that resisted your puff, required scraping to access the powder underneath. Sometimes the compact dropped and the powder shattered, transforming from a smooth pressed circle into loose powder fragments that spilled everywhere, turned your purse into a dusty crime scene, and forced you to either carefully press the fragments back together or transfer them to a jar and use them as loose powder, accepting that this was just one more small tragedy in the ongoing drama of maintaining your appearance. You checked your compact multiple times per day, before meetings, after lunch, before leaving work, before any social interaction that required you to look pulled together, professional, like someone who had her life in order even when her life was demonstrably not in order. The compact was proof, physical evidence that you were trying, that you cared about your appearance enough to maintain it, to fight the natural deterioration that happened between morning application and evening removal. By the end of the day, your face had accumulated several layers of powder from multiple touch-ups, creating a slightly thick textured finish that felt heavy, looked slightly dusty in certain lighting, but successfully maintained the matte appearance that beauty demanded. You'd carried your compact everywhere, used it constantly, relied on it completely, and tomorrow you'd do it all again. Celebrities in the 70s wore makeup that was bold, theatrical, designed to survive stage lights and camera flashes, and women at home, watching TV or flipping through magazines, wanted to recreate those looks. Farrah Fawcett's sun-kissed glow, Cher's dramatic eyes, Diana Ross's shimmering glamour. These faces became templates, aspirational blueprints for what beauty could look like if you just bought the right products. You studied these faces carefully, not just glanced at them, but really studied them, noting the placement of the blush, the thickness of the eyeliner, the colour of the eyeshadow, the shine of the lips. You memorised the details because these details mattered, because if you could recreate even a fraction of that glamour on your own face, maybe you could capture some of that star quality, that confidence, that thing that made these women seem so effortlessly beautiful. Farrah Fawcett represented California sunshine in human form. Her makeup looked natural, which meant it actually wasn't natural at all, but rather carefully constructed to appear that way. Bronzed skin, peachy blush, glossy lips. Her eyes were defined but not dramatic, lined but not heavily, shadowed but not dark. You wanted to look like Farrah, but achieving that sun-kissed glow required foundation 2 shades darker than your actual skin, bronzer swept across your cheeks and temples, and a kind of casual confidence that couldn't be purchased at the drugstore no matter how many products you bought. Cher was the opposite of subtle. Her makeup was drama incarnated, theatrical in a way that acknowledged cameras and lights and audiences. Thick black eyeliner on both upper and lower lids, extended into dramatic wings, dark eyeshadow blended up toward her brows, contoured cheeks that created angles where nature had provided curves. Her look was unattainable for most women, too bold for the office, too dramatic for the grocery store. But you studied it anyway because it represented what makeup could be when freed from the constraints of everyday acceptability. Diana Ross shimmered. Everything about her makeup caught light, reflected it, created a glow that seemed almost supernatural. Shimmering eyeshadow, dewy skin, glossy lips. Her beauty was elegant, sophisticated, the kind of glamour that seemed to require both excellent bone structure and a dedicated makeup artist, neither of which you possessed. But you tried anyway, purchasing frosted eyeshadows and highlighting products, attempting to recreate that glow and ending up looking more greasy than dewy, more disco ball than elegant. But still, you tried. The television shows and movies of the era showcased makeup styles that filtered down into everyday life. You watched Charlie's Angels and noticed how the 3 women wore their makeup differently, each one representing a different approach to beauty. You watched variety shows where female performers appeared with makeup so bold it read clearly even on your small, slightly fuzzy television screen. You absorbed these images, filed them, away, pulled from them when you stood in your own bathroom trying to decide how much eyeshadow was appropriate for a Tuesday. Magazine spreads provided more detailed instructions. You could see the makeup up close, study the technique, read the accompanying article that explained the products used and the steps required. These articles used language that sounded both technical and aspirational. Terms like highlight and contour and blend weren't part of everyday vocabulary yet, but you encountered them in beauty magazines and tried to apply them to your own face, with varying degrees of success. Some celebrities became associated with specific makeup looks that women rushed to copy. Liza Minnelli's short hair and dramatic eyes spawned countless imitations. Goldie Hawn's bright, playful makeup influenced women who wanted to look fun, approachable, slightly less serious. Diane Keaton's more natural, tomboyish style appealed to women who were tired of the high-maintenance glamour that other celebrities represented. You didn't just copy the makeup, you copied everything. The hair, the clothes, the whole package. Because beauty in the 70s wasn't just about individual features. It was about a complete look, a presentation, a way of moving through the world that said you understood what was current, what was fashionable, what was correct. And celebrities provided the roadmap, the proof that these looks worked, that they made women beautiful, successful, admired. The disconnect between celebrity makeup and real life was obvious but ignored. Celebrities had professional makeup artists. They had perfect lighting. They had photographers who knew their best angles. You had a bathroom mirror, drugstore products, and 10 minutes before you needed to leave for work. The results were never going to match exactly, but that didn't stop you from trying, from studying, from hoping that maybe this time, with this product, you'd finally crack the code and look like the women you saw on TV. Some makeup brands capitalized on this celebrity influence directly, hiring stars to endorse products, to appear in advertisements, to lend their faces to cosmetics lines. When a celebrity you admired recommended a particular mascara or lipstick, you believed her, trusted that she actually used these products, that purchasing them would bring you one step closer to that same beauty. The reality that she probably never touched the drugstore mascara bearing her name rarely occurred to you. Or if it did, you pushed the thought away because the fantasy was more useful than the truth. There was no YouTube, no Instagram, no TikTok tutorials where someone walked you through a 10-step eyeshadow routine with perfect lighting and a ring light. Instead, there were magazines, glossy pages with photographs and written instructions that you tried to decode while standing in your bathroom, squinting at tiny print that said, "Blend upward," in a sweeping motion. The magazines arrived monthly, thick publications you bought at the grocery store checkout or received in your mailbox if you'd invested in a subscription. Cosmopolitan, Glamour, 17, Mademoiselle. Each one contained beauty sections that promised to teach you everything you needed to know about makeup, skincare, hair, the complete transformation package. You flipped to these sections immediately, before reading anything else, studying the photographs like they contained ancient wisdom, which, in a way, they did. The tutorials were static images, usually 3 or 4 photographs showing the progression from bare face to completed look. Step 1 showed a model with clean skin, no makeup, looking fresh and impossibly beautiful even without cosmetics. Step 2 showed foundation and base makeup applied. Step 3 showed eyeshadow and eyeliner. Step 4 showed the finished look, the model now fully transformed, smiling at the camera with confidence that suggested makeup had solved all her problems and possibly granted her 3 wishes. The written instructions that accompanied these photos were brief, almost cryptic. Apply eyeshadow to lid, blending upward toward the crease. Use darker shade in outer corner for depth. Line upper lash line with black pencil, extending slightly past outer corner. The instructions assumed you understood terms like crease and outer corner and blending, assumed you possessed skills you'd never been formally taught, assumed that looking at 4 photographs would somehow transfer the knowledge from the professional makeup artist who'd created the look to your untrained hands. You tried to follow along. You propped the magazine open on your bathroom counter, angling it so you could see the photos while looking in the mirror. You read step 1, attempted it, checked the photo again to see if your attempt matched what the model's face showed. Usually it didn't. Your foundation looked thicker, your blending looked less blended, your definition looked less defined. But you continued anyway, because what else could you do? This magazine was your teacher, these photographs your only instruction manual. The lighting in the magazine photos was perfect, soft and even, designed to make makeup look flawless. The lighting in your bathroom was a single bulb above the mirror, harsh and unflattering, revealing every mistake, every unblended edge, every small failure of technique. You compensated as best you could, tilting your head, stepping closer to the mirror, accepting that your makeup would never look exactly like the photograph, but hoping it would look close enough. Some magazines included diagrams, simple line drawings of a face with arrows and shaded regions showing where each product should go. These diagrams were more helpful than the photographs in some ways, clearer and more instructional, but they were also abstract, reducing the human face to a series of zones and shapes that didn't quite match the 3-dimensional reality of your own features. The language in these tutorials was encouraging but vague. Create a soft, romantic look perfect for evening. Achieve a natural glow that enhances your features. The instructions told you what to achieve without quite explaining how to achieve it, leaving significant gaps that you filled in with guesswork, trial, error, and occasional success. You collected these magazines, kept them in stacks on your nightstand or in a basket in your bathroom. You returned to certain tutorials repeatedly, trying different variations, adjusting the techniques to suit your face, your colouring, your skill level. Some looks you mastered eventually. Others remained perpetually aspirational. Photographs you studied but never quite recreated. Evidence that some beauty secrets were meant to stay in magazines, performed by professionals, admired but not replicated. The models in these tutorials were almost always young, white, professionally beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with the makeup they were demonstrating. Their bone structure was perfect. Their skin was flawless. Their features were symmetrical and photogenic. You looked nothing like them, which made following the tutorials feel slightly absurd, like learning to dance by watching someone with completely different proportions and abilities perform choreography designed specifically for their body, not yours. Still, you tried. Because these magazines were all you had. Because the women in the photographs looked confident, pulled together, successful in ways you wanted to be successful. Because somewhere between the glossy pages and your bathroom mirror, there existed the possibility that you could learn this skill, master this art, transform yourself from someone who wore makeup awkwardly into someone who wore it well. The magazine promised this transformation was possible, and most days you believed it. If you wanted professional help, you went to the department store. The cosmetics counters sat on the ground floor, gleaming under bright lights, staffed by women who wore more makeup than seemed structurally possible. They knew every product, every shade, every technique. They could look at your face and tell you exactly what you needed, whether you agreed or not. Walking up to the counter required courage. The space was intimidating, pristine, organized with the precision of a jewelry store. Glass cases displayed lipsticks in perfect rows. Mirrored surfaces reflected your face back at you from multiple angles, most of them unflattering. The women behind the counter looked impeccable, their makeup flawless, their hair perfect, their uniforms crisp. You felt immediately underdressed, under-made up, inadequate in ways that made you want to turn around and leave before anyone noticed you, but you stayed. Because you needed foundation that actually matched your skin tone. because the drugstore's 6 shades hadn't included your particular shade, because you'd been wearing the wrong colour for months and someone at work had gently suggested you might want professional guidance, and even though you'd been mortified, you'd also been grateful because you'd known, deep down, that something wasn't right. The saleswoman approached with a smile that was warm but assessing, taking in your face, your skin tone, your current makeup situation, in a single glance that felt both helpful and invasive. "Can I help you find something?" she asked, and you explained your foundation problem, your voice slightly apologetic, as if needing help with makeup was something to be embarrassed about rather than a perfectly reasonable request. She led you to the foundation display, a wall of options organised by brand and shade. She studied your face in the bright lighting, tilting your chin up, examining your jawline, your neck, the sides of your face. Then she selected 3 shades, uncapped each one, and drew small streaks directly on your jaw, creating a test strip of colour against your skin. You waited while the foundation settled, while the shade oxidised and revealed its true colour, while the saleswoman evaluated each option with the seriousness of a scientist conducting important research. "This one," she said finally, pointing to the middle streak, the one that had disappeared most completely into your skin. "This is your shade." You looked in the mirror. She was right. The colour matched perfectly, blending seamlessly, looking like skin rather than paint. You felt both relieved and slightly foolish that you'd been getting it wrong for so long, that the answer had been this simple, just walking into a store and asking for help. But the consultation didn't end there. The saleswoman had opinions about everything. Your eyeshadow colours were all wrong for your skin tone. Your blush was too orange. Your lipstick was aging you. She delivered these assessments kindly but firmly, explaining what you should be doing instead, which products would suit you better, how much everything would cost if you decided to purchase the correct items, rather than continuing to make mistakes. You sat on a high stool while she demonstrated techniques, applying products to your face with brushes and sponges you didn't own, tools that cost more than your weekly grocery budget. She worked quickly, confidently, transforming your face with an efficiency that made your own morning routine look like amateur hour. She blended your eyeshadow properly, something you'd never quite managed. She applied your eyeliner in a straight line, both eyes matching perfectly. She created contour and dimension you didn't know your face could have. The finished result was stunning. You looked like a better version of yourself, polished and professional, and pulled together in ways your bathroom mirror attempts never achieved. The saleswoman handed you a mirror, and you studied your reflection, impressed and slightly intimidated by the woman looking back. Then came the list of everything she'd used: 7 products, brushes, tools. The total cost was more than you'd planned to spend, more than was reasonable, more than you could easily justify. But your face looked so good. And the saleswoman was already writing up the sale, already pulling products from the displays, already wrapping them in tissue paper and placing them in a bag with handles, and the department store's logo embossed in gold. You bought some of it. Not everything. You couldn't afford everything. But you bought the foundation, the eyeshadow palette, 1 brush. You thanked the saleswoman, who gave you her card and encouraged you to come back any time for touch-ups, advice, or just to say hello. You left feeling both empowered and overwhelmed, carrying your small shopping bag like it contained precious artifacts, which, in their own way, they did. At home, you tried to recreate what the saleswoman had done. You followed the steps you remembered, used the products she'd recommended, attempted the techniques she'd demonstrated. The results were close, but not quite right. Your blending wasn't as smooth. Your eyeliner wasn't as straight. Your overall finish wasn't as polished. But it was better than before, noticeably better, and that felt like progress. Some women went to the department store counter regularly. developing relationships with particular saleswomen who remembered their preferences, their skin tone, their usual purchases. These relationships were transactional, but also genuine, built on mutual understanding that the saleswoman was there to sell products, but also to provide expertise, guidance, a kind of beauty mentorship that didn't exist anywhere else. More women entered the workforce in the 70s than ever before, and with that shift came new questions about appearance. What did professional makeup look like? How much was too much? How little was not enough? Women navigated these questions every morning, standing in front of mirrors, trying to find the balance between looking polished and looking too done. The office had unspoken rules about makeup, rules you learned through observation, through subtle corrections, through noticing which women got promoted and which ones stayed in the same position year after year. The rules varied by industry, by company culture, by the particular preferences of whoever was making decisions about your career. But certain patterns emerged, certain guidelines that most women followed whether they'd been explicitly stated or not. You needed to wear makeup. This was non-negotiable. Arriving without makeup was arriving without proper business attire, technically allowed but socially unacceptable, the kind of thing that made people ask if you were feeling well or experiencing personal difficulties. Makeup signalled professionalism, effort, respect for the workplace. It showed you cared about your appearance, which somehow translated to caring about your job, even though the connection between lipstick and work performance was theoretical at best. But the makeup couldn't be too dramatic. Blue eyeshadow was acceptable at the disco, but questionable in the conference room. Heavy eyeliner worked for evening, but looked harsh under fluorescent office lights. Bright lips, dark lips, frosted lips that caught every light source. These choices communicated something, though what exactly they communicated depended entirely on who was interpreting them. You aimed for a middle ground, makeup that was visible but not distracting, present but not bold, professional but still feminine. Foundation was essential, providing the smooth, even base that suggested you had your life together. Blush added colour, warmth, the appearance of health and vitality, even when you'd stayed up late finishing a report and survived on coffee and determination. Mascara opened your eyes, made you look alert, awake, ready for meetings. Lipstick completed the look, giving you colour, definition, something to reapply before important presentations when you needed a confidence boost. You learned to do your makeup quickly, efficiently, in the morning before work when time was limited. 15 minutes, maybe 20 if you were trying something new or had slept poorly and needed extra coverage. You developed a routine, a sequence of steps you could perform almost automatically, your hands moving through the familiar motions while your mind wandered to the day ahead, the meetings scheduled, the deadlines approaching. The bathroom at work became a second makeup station. You touched up at lunch, reapplying powder and lipstick, checking that your morning application had survived the first half of the day. You refreshed before afternoon meetings, especially meetings with executives, clients, anyone whose opinion mattered. Other women did the same, creating informal communities around the bathroom mirror, conversations happening between powder applications and lipstick touch-ups. Some men had opinions about women's workplace makeup. They commented when you wore too much, suggesting you looked better natural, by which they meant with different makeup that they couldn't identify as makeup. They commented when you wore too little, asking if you were tired or sick, expressing concern that was more criticism than care. They rarely commented when you got it exactly right, that perfect balance between polished and understated, because getting it right meant being invisible in the best possible way, looking professional without looking like you'd tried. The double standard was obvious but rarely acknowledged. Men showed up to work with faces that required no maintenance, no products, no daily rituals of application and adjustment. Their professional appearance consisted of shaving and combing their hair, tasks that took minutes, rather than the 20 or 30 minutes women spent creating acceptable faces. But this wasn't discussed, wasn't questioned, was simply accepted as part of the landscape of professional life. Younger women, fresh out of college, sometimes pushed against these expectations. They arrived wearing bold colours, dramatic eyes, looks that communicated confidence or rebellion, or simply a lack of understanding about workplace norms. They learned quickly, through direct feedback or through being passed over for opportunities, that professional advancement often required aesthetic conformity. Their makeup softened, lightened, became more conservative as they adapted to the unspoken requirements of office culture. Some professions allowed more freedom. Creative fields, advertising, fashion. These industries embraced bolder makeup, saw it as evidence of artistic sensibility rather than unprofessionalism. But even there, limits existed. Invisible lines that you didn't know existed until you crossed them and noticed the reactions. The subtle shifts in how people treated you. The opportunities that went to someone else. You carried your makeup bag to work sometimes, keeping a small pouch in your desk drawer for emergency touch-ups, midday repairs, the inevitable moment when you caught your reflection and realized your carefully applied morning face had deteriorated into something that needed immediate attention. The bag contained essentials, powder, lipstick, maybe a compact with blush, tissues for blotting, a small mirror in case the bathroom was occupied. The relationship between makeup and professional success was complicated, unspoken, probably unfair. But it was also real. The women who advanced often looked polished, put together, like they'd mastered not just their jobs but also the performance of professional femininity that included appropriate makeup, appropriate hair, appropriate everything. You learnt to perform it too, applying your makeup each morning not just for yourself but for the workplace, for the expectations, for the invisible judges who evaluated your appearance alongside your work and somehow found both equally important. Ironically, even as makeup became bolder and more colourful, the language around it often emphasised looking natural. Advertisements promised products that would give you a fresh-faced glow, a barely-there look, a hint of colour. But the products themselves, thick foundations, bright eyeshadows, frosted lips, were anything but natural. The contradiction was quiet but persistent. The word natural appeared everywhere in beauty advertising and editorial content. Natural beauty, natural glow, natural enhancement. The implication was that makeup should look effortless, invisible, like you'd simply woken up with perfect skin, defined eyes, and rosy lips. The reality, of course, was that achieving this natural look required significant time, multiple products, and considerable skill. You pursued this natural ideal even while wearing blue eyeshadow and frosted lipstick. The eyeshadow was natural because it enhanced your eyes rather than transforming them completely, or so the logic went. The lipstick was natural because it complemented your natural lip colour, even though your actual natural lip colour bore no resemblance to frosted peach. The contradiction didn't bother you because everyone participated in it. Everyone understood that natural was a concept rather than a reality, a goal that existed somewhere between bare face and full theatrical makeup. The no-makeup makeup look existed in theory but proved difficult in practice. To look like you weren't wearing makeup while actually wearing makeup required choosing the right shades, applying them with a light hand, blending everything perfectly. Most women's attempts resulted in looking slightly washed out, undefined, like they'd forgotten to finish getting ready. The sweet spot between enough makeup to look polished and little enough makeup to look natural was narrow, and finding it required either natural talent or extensive practice, neither of which most women possessed. Men frequently contributed to this contradiction by praising natural beauty while preferring women who wore makeup. They claimed to like women who looked fresh-faced and effortless, not realizing that fresh-faced required foundation, powder, mascara, blush, and lip colour at minimum. When women actually appeared without makeup, these same men often expressed concern, asked if something was wrong, suggested they looked tired. The natural beauty they claimed to prefer was actually carefully constructed artifice, makeup applied skillfully enough to appear absent. Beauty magazines acknowledged this contradiction in roundabout ways. Articles titled "The Natural Look" featured photographs of models wearing obvious makeup, their skin too perfect, their eyes too defined, their lips too coloured to be truly bare. The accompanying instructions involved 10 or 12 products, multiple application techniques, and significant time investment. Natural apparently was complicated. Some women rejected the contradiction entirely, choosing either bold makeup without apology or no makeup at all, refusing to participate in the fiction that makeup could be simultaneously present and invisible. These women were outliers, swimming against cultural currents that insisted femininity required enhancement, but enhancement should look effortless. That beauty demanded work, but the work should be hidden. The products themselves reinforced the contradiction. Foundation marketed as providing a natural finish was still thick, still obvious, still created a surface that looked nothing like actual skin. Blush described as giving you a natural flush was still pigmented powder in a compact, still required application and blending, still sat on your face rather than emanating from within. Lipstick promising to enhance your natural lip colour came in shades named after fruits and flowers, names that suggested nature but delivered artificial colour. You internalized these contradictions without quite realizing it. You applied makeup to look natural. You enhanced your features to make them look unenhanced. You spent 30 minutes creating a face that appeared to require no effort. The logic was circular but compelling, a belief system that everyone participated in because the alternative, acknowledging that beauty was constructed rather than inherent, felt uncomfortable, threatening to the entire structure of how femininity was understood and performed. Photographs from the 70s reveal the extent of the contradiction. Women who believed they were wearing natural makeup appear obviously made up to modern eyes, their foundation thick, their eyeshadow visible, their lips clearly coloured. But within the context of the era, their makeup registered as relatively natural compared to bolder alternatives. The disco looks, the theatrical applications, the truly dramatic faces that made no pretense of effortlessness. The pursuit of natural beauty through artificial means created a strange kind of cognitive dissonance. You knew you were applying products. You felt the weight of foundation on your skin. You saw the colour transfer from lipstick tube to lips, and yet you described the result as natural, believed it was natural, defended it as natural when anyone suggested otherwise. The performance required believing your own performance, accepting that natural was whatever women did to look acceptably feminine rather than anything actually occurring in nature. Some women eventually grew tired of the contradiction, the constant maintenance required to appear effortless, the pressure to look made up while claiming naturalness. They questioned why beauty required so much work, why natural couldn't actually mean natural, why women's faces needed correction and enhancement before becoming acceptable. These questions were uncomfortable, revolutionary even, challenging assumptions so fundamental that most people never examined them at all. The answers, when they came, wouldn't arrive until later, after the 70s ended and new conversations about beauty, femininity, and authenticity began reshaping cultural expectations. Taking off your makeup at night was a ritual. You sat at your vanity or stood at the bathroom sink, reached for a jar of cold cream, thick, white, slightly medicinal smelling, and scooped out a generous amount. You massaged it into your face in slow circles, watching as the makeup dissolved into an oily, colourful mess. Then you wiped it away with a tissue or a washcloth, revealing the tired, slightly pink face beneath. The cold cream jar sat on your bathroom counter or vanity table. a staple as essential as toothpaste or shampoo. The jar was usually glass, heavy, with a metal lid that twisted off to reveal the cream inside, smooth and thick, sitting in a perfect white dome that bore the impressions of your previous scoops. Some brands were fancier than others, came in prettier jars, promised additional benefits beyond mere makeup removal, but they all essentially did the same thing, dissolved the layers of product you'd applied that morning and reapplied throughout the day. You scooped the cream with your fingers, taking more than seemed necessary because experience had taught you that skimping only meant needing to repeat the process. The cream was cold initially, hence the name, though it warmed quickly against your skin. You spread it across your face in gentle circular motions, starting with your cheeks, moving to your forehead, down your nose, across your chin. The cream mixed with your foundation, your powder, your blush, creating a beige-pink slurry that looked somewhat alarming but felt oddly satisfying. Your eyes required special attention. The eyeshadow, mascara and eyeliner that had seemed so essential that morning now clung stubbornly to your lids and lashes. You applied more cold cream around your eyes, gentle because the skin there was delicate, firm enough to actually remove the makeup. You closed your eyes and massaged carefully, feeling the mascara dissolve, the eyeliner soften, the eyeshadow break down into oily residue. The removal process revealed just how much makeup you'd been wearing. The tissue or washcloth came away streaked with colour, beige foundation mixed with pink blush, black mascara, brown eyeliner, whatever eyeshadow shade you'd chosen that morning. You wiped again, and the cloth showed more colour. And again. Usually it took 3 or 4 wipes before the cloth came away relatively clean, showing only faint traces of makeup rather than the dramatic streaks of the first pass. Some women used alternative removal methods, cleansing lotions that promised to be gentler than cold cream, makeup remover specifically formulated for eyes, because regular cold cream sometimes stung or blurred your vision temporarily. Soap and water for those who either couldn't afford cold cream or preferred the feeling of cleanliness that soap provided. But cold cream remained the standard, the method most women used, the jar that sat on bathroom counters across America. The feeling of freshly cleaned skin was both relief and revelation. Your face felt lighter without all those layers of product. Your skin could breathe. You looked different without makeup, younger in some ways, older in others, definitely more vulnerable. The face in the mirror was your real face, the one that existed before enhancement, the one you saw first thing in the morning and last thing at night, the face that only your family and closest friends ever encountered. But that clean feeling didn't last long. Cold cream left a residue, an oily film that sat on your skin feeling moisturizing and slightly suffocating. Some women followed up with soap and water, washing away the cold cream residue, creating multiple steps in the removal process. Others applied toner, astringent products that removed the oily residue and supposedly tightened pores, though whether they actually did either of these things was debatable. The washcloths used for makeup removal became stained over time. Foundation and mascara didn't completely wash out, leaving ghost impressions on the fabric, faint beige and black marks that accumulated with each use. You kept designated makeup removal cloths, separate from the washcloths used for actually washing, accepting that these cloths would never be truly clean again, that they would carry permanent evidence of your daily makeup routine. Occasionally you went to bed without removing your makeup. Maybe you were too tired, maybe you'd had too much wine, maybe you just didn't care that particular night, couldn't muster the energy for the cold cream ritual, the wiping, the washing, the whole production. You woke the next morning with mascara smudged under your eyes, foundation staining your pillowcase, your face feeling tight and clogged and unhappy. These mornings reminded you why the nightly removal ritual mattered, why skipping it was never worth the extra 10 minutes of sleep. Your skin had its own opinions about cold cream. Some women's skin loved it, found it moisturizing, woke up with soft, hydrated faces. Other women's skin hated it, broke out in small bumps and clogged pores, rebelled against the heavy, oily formula by producing even more oil. You adjusted based on your skin's reactions, switching brands, trying different removal methods, seeking the balance between adequately removed makeup and adequately happy skin. The ritual became meditative after a while, the circular massage motions, the gradual dissolving of the day's face, the slow revelation of your actual face underneath. It marked the transition from public to private, from performed to authentic, from the woman everyone saw to the woman only you knew. Tomorrow you'd apply makeup again, reconstruct that public face, go out into the world wearing your acceptable femininity. But tonight, for these few minutes between removal and sleep, you existed without it. Just skin and bones and tired eyes, nothing enhanced, nothing corrected, nothing but you. The ingredients in 1970s makeup were different from what we use today. Some products contained lead, some contained mercury, some contained chemicals that would later be banned or heavily regulated. Women didn't know this, of course. They trusted the products on the shelves, trusted the brands, trusted that if something was for sale, it must be safe. The cosmetics industry in the 70s operated with significantly less oversight than it does today. The FDA had limited authority over makeup products. Companies were not required to test for safety before bringing products to market. Ingredients lists were often incomplete or absent entirely. You bought a lipstick, applied it multiple times daily, never knowing exactly what you were putting on your lips, what was being absorbed into your skin, what long-term effects these chemicals might have. Lead appeared in many cosmetics, particularly in colour cosmetics like lipstick and eyeshadow. Lead acetate was used in some hair dyes. Lead chromate provided bright, vivid colours that women wanted, those bold reds and oranges that define the era's aesthetic. The amounts were small, supposedly safe according to the standards of the time, but lead accumulates in the body, building up slowly over years of exposure. Women who wore lipstick daily were ingesting small amounts of lead with every application, every time they ate or drank while wearing it, every time they licked their lips. Mercury compounds appeared in some skin-lightening creams and preservatives. These products promised to fade dark spots, even out skin tone, create the flawless complexion that beauty demanded. The mercury worked in its way by actually damaging the skin's melanin-producing cells. But mercury is toxic, affecting the nervous system, kidneys, brain. Women applied these creams faithfully, following package instructions, never suspecting that their pursuit of beauty was causing actual harm. Formaldehyde, now recognized as a carcinogen, was common in nail polish and nail hardeners. It helped polish dry quickly, made nails stronger, seemed like a useful ingredient. Women painted their nails in small rooms with poor ventilation, breathing in formaldehyde vapors, feeling slightly dizzy or headache-prone but attributing it to other causes, never connecting their symptoms to the pretty bottle of polish they'd just finished applying. Coal tar dyes provided the vibrant colours in eyeshadows, blushes, lipsticks, all the bold pigments that defined 70s makeup. These dyes were cheap, effective, and potentially carcinogenic. Some were later banned in cosmetics. Others are still used but with more restrictions. In the 70s, they were everywhere, unquestioned, part of nearly every coloured cosmetic product. Talc, used as a filler and absorbent in powders and eyeshadows, sometimes contained asbestos contamination. This wasn't intentional. Talc and asbestos deposits occur near each other geologically, and mining one sometimes meant accidentally mining the other. Testing standards weren't rigorous enough to catch every contamination. Women dusted powder across their faces, clouds of fine particles floating in the air, breathing in whatever happened to be in that powder, trusting that products sold for faces must be safe for faces. Fragrance formulas were proprietary, protected as trade secrets, listed simply as fragrance on ingredient labels when labels existed at all. These fragrances often contained phthalates, chemicals that helped scents last longer but also disrupted hormones. Women wore these products daily, the fragrances mixing with their own scent, becoming part of their personal presence, never knowing about the endocrine disruptors they were applying to their skin. Preservatives kept products from growing bacteria, from becoming contaminated, from making women sick in obvious, immediate ways. But some of these preservatives, parabens and others, had their own problems, their own subtle effects that wouldn't be understood for decades. The choice was between products that spoiled quickly, potentially causing infections, or products preserved with chemicals whose long-term effects remained unknown. The industry chose preservation, chose shelf stability, chose the problems they couldn't see over the problems they could. The regulations that did exist weren't uniformly enforced. Small companies, fly-by-night operations, marketed cosmetics that made outrageous claims, contained questionable ingredients, sometimes caused obvious harm. Women suffered allergic reactions, chemical burns, hair loss, skin damage. They complained to manufacturers who ignored them or blamed user error. They complained to authorities who had limited power to act. The market slowly pushed out the worst offenders, but slowly meant years, meant thousands of women affected before anything changed. Some women noticed problems, skin that became more sensitive over time, allergies that developed after years of using the same products, mysterious symptoms that doctors couldn't quite explain, and patients couldn't quite connect to their daily makeup routine. But most women noticed nothing, or at least nothing dramatic enough to cause concern. The effects were subtle, cumulative, the kind of damage that happens too slowly to notice, that only becomes clear decades later when patterns emerge, when enough people report similar problems that researchers start investigating. Consumer advocacy groups began raising questions in the 70s, asking about safety testing, pushing for better regulations, demanding transparency about ingredients. The cosmetics industry pushed back, argued that their products were safe, that regulations would be burdensome, that women trusted their brands, and that trust shouldn't be disturbed by government interference. The battle played out in newspapers, in congressional hearings, in slow incremental changes to law and policy that wouldn't fully materialize until decades later. You wore your makeup, unaware of these debates, these dangers, these chemical complexities. You trusted that the pretty compact in your purse was safe because it was sold legally, advertised widely, used by millions of women just like you. And maybe it was safe, or safe enough, or at least not dangerous enough to cause immediate, obvious harm. The long-term effects, the subtle accumulated damage, the health problems that might appear decades later, these weren't part of your morning routine, weren't considerations when you stood at the drugstore display choosing between shades. You wanted to look beautiful. The products promised to help. The transaction seemed simple, straightforward, innocent. What happened in your body at the molecular level remained invisible, unknown, a story that wouldn't be fully told until long after the 70s had ended. There was daytime makeup and there was evening makeup, and the two were distinctly different. Daytime meant softer colours, lighter application, a look that could survive fluorescent office lights and afternoon errands. Evening makeup was bolder, more dramatic, designed for dim lighting, dinner parties, nights out. You learned to adjust your face depending on where you were going. Daytime makeup started with the same base as evening, foundation and powder, but the application was slightly lighter, the coverage less extreme. You wanted to look polished but not overdone, professional but not theatrical. Your eyeshadow stayed in neutral territory, browns and taupes and soft greys, colours that defined your eyes without announcing themselves. Your eyeliner was thinner, less extended, present but subtle. Your mascara was 1 or 2 coats rather than 3 or 4. Your blush was soft pink or peach, applied with a lighter hand than evening would require. The goal of daytime makeup was enhancement that looked effortless, makeup that improved your appearance without drawing attention to itself. You wanted co-workers to think you looked nice, not to notice your eyeshadow. You wanted to project competence, professionalism, put-togetherness. Your makeup communicated that you'd made an effort, that you cared about your appearance, that you understood workplace expectations about professional femininity. Lipstick for daytime was usually lighter, softer, less dramatic than evening choices. Pale pinks, nude shades, colours that added definition without boldness. The frosted finish worked here, catching light subtly rather than dramatically. You reapplied at lunch, after coffee, maintaining the polish throughout the workday. Evening makeup transformed your face into something more dramatic, more glamorous, more suited to dim lighting and special occasions. You started with the same base but built on it, adding more colour, more definition, more everything. Your eyeshadow became bolder, blues and greens and purples, colours you'd never wear to the office but felt appropriate for dinner, dancing, parties. You applied darker shades in your crease, lighter shades on your lid, creating depth and dimension that would read clearly in low lighting. Your eyeliner thickened, extended further, became more theatrical. You lined your entire eye, top and bottom, sometimes adding extra liner to your waterline for maximum drama. The wing at your outer corner grew larger, more pronounced, lifting your eye shape in ways that photographs captured beautifully. Your mascara accumulated in multiple coats, creating the thick, spiky lashes that characterize 70s evening looks. Blush for evening was brighter, more pigmented, applied with confidence rather than caution. You could be bolder in dim lighting, knowing that what looked dramatic in your bathroom mirror would look perfect under candlelight. The circles on your cheeks became more defined, more visible, more intentionally placed. Evening lipstick was where you could take real risks. Dark colours, bold colours, deep wines and bright corals and shimmering golds. Frosted lipsticks that sparkled under restaurant lighting. Colours that demanded attention, that made your lips the focal point of your face, that announced you weren't going to the grocery store or a parent-teacher conference, but somewhere special, somewhere that justified the extra effort. The transition from day to evening makeup was its own ritual. You arrived home from work, assessed your current face, decided what needed to be adjusted. Sometimes you started fresh, removing everything and beginning again. Other times you built on what was already there, adding drama to your existing base, intensifying colours, extending liner, applying more mascara. The transformation took 15 or 20 minutes, turning your professional office face into something suitable for evening activities. Special occasions required their own makeup considerations. Weddings meant elegant but not attention-stealing unless you were the bride. Funerals meant subtle, respectful, makeup that looked like you'd made an effort without appearing too decorated. Holiday parties meant festive colours, shimmer, looks that matched the celebratory atmosphere. Each occasion had unspoken rules about appropriate makeup, guidelines you learned through observation and occasional mistakes. Photographs influenced makeup choices significantly. You knew that evening events would likely include photographs, frozen moments that would exist forever in albums, shown to future children and grandchildren. You wanted to look good in those photographs, which meant makeup that was slightly more dramatic than seemed necessary in person, but would photograph well under flashbulbs and party lighting. Your evening makeup was partially for the people who would see you in person, and partially for the camera, for posterity, for the permanent record of how you looked in this particular moment of your life. The makeup you wore communicated where you were going, what you were doing, how you wanted to be perceived. Daytime makeup said professional, responsible, together. Evening makeup said glamorous, fun, ready for celebration. The two faces existed on the same person, but served different purposes, met different expectations, played different roles in the complex performance of femininity that women navigated daily. Mothers and daughters often disagreed about makeup. Older women, who'd come of age in the 50s and 60s, preferred subtler looks, softer colours, more conservative application. Younger women, teenagers and women in their 20s wanted bolder shades, heavier eyeliner, looks that felt modern, rebellious, distinctly not what their mothers wore. Your mother watched you apply blue eyeshadow and sighed, a small sound that communicated disappointment, concern and resignation all at once. "That's a lot of colour," she said carefully, trying to be diplomatic, trying not to start an argument before breakfast. You ignored her or defended your choice, explaining that this was what everyone wore, that her ideas about makeup were outdated, that she didn't understand current beauty standards. The conversation ended in familiar tension, both of you retreating to your positions, the makeup staying on your face, the disapproval staying in the air between you. The disagreement wasn't really about eyeshadow. It was about change, about shifting standards of femininity, about mothers watching their daughters grow into women who made different choices, who valued different things, who expressed beauty in ways that looked foreign, excessive, sometimes alarming. Your mother's makeup had been softer, more traditional, designed to enhance rather than transform. Your makeup was louder, bolder, designed to announce rather than whisper. The difference felt generational, cultural, like evidence of the gap between women who'd come of age in different decades. Older women criticized the thick foundation younger women wore, the heavy blush, the frosted lips, the dramatic eyes. They thought it looked artificial, overdone, like too much effort showing. They preferred the more natural looks of their own youth, even though those looks had involved plenty of makeup too, just makeup applied differently, marketed differently, understood differently. Natural was always relative, always a moving target, always whatever the speaker's generation had decided was appropriate. Younger women found their mother's makeup boring, dated, old-fashioned in ways that made them look older than they needed to. Why didn't their mothers try new colours, experiment with current trends, update their looks to match the changing times? But mothers resisted, comfortable with familiar routines, skeptical of bold colours, concerned that trying too hard to look young would make them look foolish. The makeup choices reflected larger attitudes about aging, about remaining relevant, about accepting or fighting the passage of time. Teenagers pushed boundaries with makeup in ways that horrified their mothers. They applied eyeliner too thick, eyeshadow too bright, blush and circles too obvious. They experimented with looks they'd seen in magazines or on television, trying to recreate celebrity faces on their own teenage features, succeeding partially and failing spectacularly. Mothers intervened, suggesting lighter application, offering to teach proper techniques, attempting to steer their daughters toward more appropriate looks. Daughters resisted, seeing their mother's advice as criticism, control, evidence of generational disconnect. The bathroom became a battleground. Daughters commandeered counter space with their growing collections of cosmetics, tubes and compacts and pencils spreading across surfaces, displacing their mothers' carefully organised products. Mothers complained about the mess, the cost, the time their daughters spent in front of the mirror. Daughters complained about interference, about being told they wore too much makeup or the wrong colours, or looked better without it. Comments that felt like attacks on their emerging identities. Some mothers tried to embrace current trends, applying blue eyeshadow alongside their daughters, attempting to stay relevant, to maintain connection through shared beauty rituals. Sometimes this worked, creating bonding moments, opportunities for daughters to teach mothers new techniques. Other times it backfired, daughters feeling embarrassed by their mother's attempts to look young, mothers feeling foolish in colours that didn't suit them, both women retreating back to their separate aesthetic camps. Grandmothers added another layer to the generational divide. They watched both daughters and granddaughters with bewilderment, comparing current makeup to the styles of their own youth, styles that were even more different, even further removed from 70s bold colours and heavy application. They offered comments that everyone ignored, observations about how women used to look, complaints about modern excess, nostalgia for eras that younger women hadn't experienced and couldn't appreciate. The divide extended beyond family. Older women at work, in church, in social settings, evaluated younger women's makeup choices with visible judgment. Young women working in offices received feedback from older supervisors about excessive makeup, inappropriate colours, looks that weren't professional enough. The feedback was always framed as helpful guidance, career advice, but it felt like generational policing, older women enforcing their standards on younger women who wanted different things. But the divide wasn't absolute. Some older women embraced bold makeup, kept current with trends, wore blue eyeshadow and frosted lips alongside their daughters. Some younger women preferred subtle makeup, rejected dramatic looks, chose styles that would have pleased their grandmothers. The generational patterns existed but didn't determine individual choices, didn't eliminate the possibility of women making decisions that crossed age-based expectations. The disagreements about makeup reflected larger tensions about femininity, beauty, aging, change. How should women present themselves? What did appropriate femininity look like? Who got to decide? The answers varied by generation, by personal preference, by context. The conversations between mothers and daughters, awkward and tense and ongoing, were really conversations about identity, about autonomy, about the right to choose how your own face looked, and what that choice meant about who you were. The makeup was just the visible surface of deeper questions about becoming women, about being women, about the many different ways those words could be defined and performed and lived. For some women, makeup was a chore, something society expected them to do. For others, it was creative expression, a way to experiment with colour, to play with different versions of themselves, to feel powerful, beautiful, confident. The line between obligation and joy wasn't always clear, and it shifted depending on the day, the mood, the context. You stood in front of your mirror on Saturday morning, no work to attend, no obligations demanding your appearance, and decided to do your makeup anyway. Not because you had to, but because you wanted to. Because the ritual felt meditative, calming, like a form of creativity that happened on your face instead of on canvas or paper. You chose colours based on feeling rather than appropriateness, selected the blue eyeshadow because you liked it, applied your blush in slightly different placement just to see how it looked. This was makeup as play, as experimentation, as art. You tried techniques you'd seen in magazines but modified them, adapted them to your face, your preferences, your own sense of what looked good. You mixed shades that weren't supposed to be mixed. You applied liner in slightly different ways, extending it further or curving it differently, creating small variations on familiar themes. The results weren't always perfect. Sometimes they looked strange or unbalanced, but the process itself felt freeing, creative, yours. Some women found genuine joy in makeup. They collected products the way other people collected books or records, not out of obligation but out of enthusiasm. They read beauty magazines not because they needed improvement, but because they enjoyed learning new techniques, seeing new looks, thinking about colour and composition and the small art form that existed between compact and face. Their makeup collections grew beyond necessity, containing shades they rarely wore but loved to own, products purchased simply for the pleasure of trying something new. For these women, makeup was transformation, but also affirmation. Putting on makeup made them feel more themselves, not less. The face they created with cosmetics felt more accurate than their bare face, like they were revealing rather than concealing, emphasizing rather than changing. Their makeup choices were deeply personal, reflecting their taste, their personality, their sense of who they were and how they wanted to present themselves to the world. But for other women, makeup remained primarily obligation. They wore it because not wearing it felt socially unacceptable, professionally risky, like showing up to life incomplete. They found no joy in the application process, no satisfaction in the results beyond meeting minimum requirements. Their makeup routines were efficient rather than creative, quick rather than experimental, sufficient rather than excellent. They did what was necessary and nothing more, resenting the time it took, the expectation it represented, the constant maintenance it demanded. The obligation felt heavier for some than others. Women in professional settings felt more pressure to wear makeup than women in creative fields. Women in public-facing roles felt more scrutiny than women in behind-the-scenes positions. Women in conservative communities felt more judgment than women in progressive areas. The amount of freedom to skip makeup, to experiment boldly, to make unconventional choices varied dramatically based on context, circumstance, the particular set of expectations surrounding each woman's life. Some women moved between these positions, finding joy in makeup on some days and resenting it on others. Weekend makeup felt different from workday makeup, even when the products were the same. Makeup applied for yourself felt different from makeup applied for others, even when the results looked identical. The meaning shifted with the context, with your internal state, with whether you were choosing freely or responding to external pressure. Young women often started with makeup as play, experimenting with their mother's cosmetics, trying on different faces like costumes, treating the whole endeavour as creative exploration. Then they grew older and discovered expectations, rules, judgments, the ways that makeup choices were evaluated and criticised and used to make assumptions about character, professionalism, seriousness. The play became performance, the creativity became compliance, and some of the joy drained away, replaced by awareness of how much their appearance mattered to other people's opinions of them. But some women managed to maintain that creative spirit despite the expectations, despite the pressure. They wore the blue eyeshadow because they liked it, not because it was trending. They skipped makeup on days when they didn't feel like it, accepting whatever social consequences came with that choice. They made bold decisions, unusual combinations, looks that pleased themselves even when others found them strange or excessive or inappropriate. Their relationship with makeup was complicated, involved both obligation and expression, but they claimed the expression part fiercely, refused to let expectations completely eliminate the creative possibilities. The relationship between makeup and identity was personal, individual, impossible to generalize. What felt like self-expression to one woman felt like self-betrayal to another. What looked like obligation from outside might feel like choice from inside. The same actions, applying foundation and eyeshadow and lipstick, carried different meanings for different women, meant different things even for the same woman on different days. The question underneath everything was, whose face is this? Does it belong to you, to your employer, to your husband, to society's expectations about feminine appearance? Can wearing makeup be both compliance and rebellion? Can it be simultaneously oppression and empowerment? The answers weren't simple, weren't singular, changed depending on who was asking and why. But the questions themselves were important, necessary, part of understanding what makeup meant beyond the physical products, beyond the colours and techniques, in the deeper territory of identity, autonomy, choice. Makeup wasn't cheap, but it also wasn't prohibitively expensive for most women. A lipstick might cost $2, an eyeshadow palette might cost $5. Women budgeted for cosmetics the way they budgeted for groceries or gas, allocating a small portion of their income to maintaining the appearance society expected of them. You stood in the drugstore aisle, mentally calculating costs. Foundation was $4, a significant investment that would last 2 or 3 months if you were careful. Mascara was $3, good for maybe 2 months before it dried out or started clumping worse than usual. Powder was $3.50, blush was $2.75, lipstick was $2, but you needed multiple shades, different colours for different occasions, so multiply that by 3 or 4. The numbers added up quickly, transforming a simple shopping trip into a financial decision that required thought, priority, compromise. Some products were worth the money. Foundation was essential, non-negotiable, something you needed to buy regularly regardless of cost. Mascara fell into the same category. Other products felt more optional, more flexible. You could skip the new eyeshadow palette, make do with what you already had, wait until next month or next paycheck, or until the old palette was completely used up before replacing it. Department store cosmetics cost significantly more than drugstore versions. A lipstick that cost $2 at the drugstore might cost $5 or $6 at the department store counter. The department store promised better quality, longer-lasting formulas, more, prestigious brands, the expertise of trained saleswomen. Whether these promises justified the higher cost depended on your budget, your priorities, your belief in the relationship between price and quality. You made choices based on what you could afford. Foundation from the department store because getting the right shade mattered enough to justify the cost. Mascara from the drugstore because expensive and cheap mascara performed similarly once they were on your lashes. Lipstick from wherever had the colour you wanted at a price you could manage. The mix of high and low, expensive and affordable, created a cosmetics collection that reflected both your beauty priorities and your financial reality. The cost extended beyond the initial purchase. Makeup required tools, brushes and sponges and applicators that wore out and needed replacing. It required makeup remover, cotton balls or cloths, face wash, moisturizer to repair the damage that heavy makeup inflicted on your skin. The complete system of buying, applying, maintaining and removing makeup created an ongoing expense that never quite disappeared, just shifted from one product to another, one need to the next. Women with less money made difficult decisions. Buy the foundation you needed, or pay the electric bill. Purchase new mascara or put that $3 toward groceries. The choices weren't dramatic, weren't life or death, but they created stress, required calculation, meant going without sometimes, wearing makeup that was too old or wrong shades, or running low because replacing it meant not buying something else. The beauty industry understood these constraints and adapted. They offered smaller sizes, trial versions, budget lines with simpler packaging and fewer shade options. They ran sales and promotions, 2-for-1 deals that felt like savings even when they encouraged you to buy things you didn't strictly need. They positioned cosmetics as accessible luxury, small treats you could afford, little ways to feel pampered even on a limited budget. Some women spent more on makeup than seemed reasonable, justifying the expense as investment in their appearance, their self-esteem, their professional prospects. If wearing the right makeup meant getting promoted, or finding a husband, or feeling confident enough to navigate a difficult world, wasn't that worth the cost? The logic was hard to argue with even when the causation was questionable, even when the connection between lipstick and life success was more cultural belief than measurable reality. Others resented the expense, resented that maintaining an acceptable female appearance required constant financial outlay that men didn't face. A man could buy a razor and shaving cream, a few dollars that lasted months and be done. A woman needed foundation, powder, blush, eyeshadow, eyeliner, mascara, lipstick, tools, removers, all requiring regular replacement, creating an ongoing cost that added up over months and years to significant amounts of money. You tracked what you spent sometimes, adding up receipts, calculating the annual cost of your makeup habit. The number was always higher than you expected, always enough to make you pause and consider whether this expense was necessary, whether you could reduce it, cut back, make different choices. But then you looked at yourself without makeup and remembered why you spent the money, remembered the difference between acceptable and unacceptable, remembered that this wasn't really optional, even though it felt like choice. The cosmetics companies profited enormously from these small repeated purchases. Millions of women buying lipstick every few months, foundation several times per year, mascara regularly, all the small transactions that added up to an enormous industry built on the premise that women's natural faces needed improvement, and that improvement required products that needed to be purchased repeatedly forever. Some women found ways to make their makeup last longer. They used less foundation, applied it more thinly, made a bottle stretch for 4 months instead of 3. They mixed old lipstick remnants, creating custom shades, using every last bit before buying new. They shared with friends, borrowed colours for special occasions, traded products that didn't work for them but might work for someone else. These small economies added up, reduced costs slightly, gave women some sense of control over the expense. But the fundamental reality remained. Being a woman who met basic appearance expectations cost money, required ongoing financial commitment, created a permanent line item in your budget that you couldn't eliminate without social consequences. The makeup sitting on your bathroom counter represented not just beauty products, but investment, maintenance cost, the price of admission to acceptable femininity. And every month, every season, every year, that price came due again. Different products but same purpose, different amounts but same underlying requirement. Pay to maintain your face, pay to be acceptable, pay to be woman enough for the world you lived in. Everyone made mistakes. You bought the wrong shade of foundation and wore it anyway. You applied too much blush and looked like a porcelain doll who had seen some things. You experimented with eyeliner and ended up with a line so crooked it defied geometry. But you learned. You adjusted. You got better, or at least more comfortable with your own particular version of imperfection. The mistakes started early, often in teenage years when you first gained access to makeup and had no idea what you were doing. You applied eyeshadow with your fingers because you didn't know brushes existed or mattered. You drew eyeliner in thick, uneven lines that made your eyes look smaller rather than larger. You wore lipstick that bled into the fine lines around your mouth, creating a feathered effect that photographs captured mercilessly. Foundation mistakes were particularly visible. You'd choose a shade in the drugstore's terrible fluorescent lighting, take it home, apply it in your bathroom's different terrible lighting, and discover it was 2 shades too dark or too light or too orange. But you'd already opened it, already used it, couldn't return it. So you wore it anyway, telling yourself it wasn't that noticeable, even though it absolutely was, even though the line of demarcation at your jawline was visible from space, even though your face and your neck were clearly 2 different colours that had never met and had no intention of getting along. The blush circle problem plagued everyone at some point. You'd apply too much in one spot, creating a concentrated burst of colour that looked like someone had stamped you with a round pink seal. Or you'd place it too high, too low, too far to the side, discovering through trial and error that the apples of your cheeks were a very specific location that you couldn't identify until you'd spent months marking every other part of your face with blush that looked wrong. Eyeshadow fell into your crease, collected in the fold of your eyelid, created lines where lines shouldn't exist. You discovered the hard way that blending mattered. That stopping eyeshadow at a clear edge made you look like you'd drawn on your face with markers. That gradual transitions between colours required time and technique and patience you often didn't possess. Mascara mistakes were immediate and dramatic. You'd blink too soon and stamp black marks on your eyelid. You'd apply too much and your lashes would stick together in clumps so obvious that people asked if you were okay. You'd use old dried out mascara that flaked throughout the day, creating small black specks under your eyes that made you look either sick or like you'd been crying or like you'd stood too close to a pepper grinder. Lipstick bled, feathered, transferred onto your teeth during important conversations. You'd eat lunch and forget to reapply, walking around all afternoon with lips that were coloured only on the outer edges, the centre worn away, creating an odd ring effect that made you look like you'd been eating aggressively or making out with someone who didn't exist. You'd choose colours that looked beautiful in the tube and somehow terrible on your actual lips, shades that made your teeth look yellow or your skin look sallow or your whole face look vaguely ill. The learning happened through repetition, through mistakes repeated until you finally figured out how to avoid them. You learned that less was often more, except when more was actually necessary, a distinction that took years to understand. You learned which products worked for your skin, your colouring, your particular features, and which ones fought against you no matter how carefully you applied them. You watched other women, studied their faces, tried to figure out what they were doing differently that made their makeup look smooth and yours look patchy. Sometimes you asked for help, admitting to friends or sisters or the knowledgeable woman at the department store counter that you weren't sure what you were doing, that you needed guidance. These admissions felt vulnerable, like confessing you didn't know how to be a woman properly, but they also resulted in actual advice, techniques that improved your skills, suggestions that made your daily routine more effective. Some mistakes you never fully corrected. Your eyeliner remained slightly uneven, one side always slightly higher or thicker than the other despite your best efforts. Your lipstick still transferred onto coffee cups and napkins, and the occasional person's cheek when you leaned in to hug them. Your foundation still looked slightly mask-like in certain lighting, clearly present rather than invisible. But these persistent imperfections became familiar, part of your look, acceptable variations rather than catastrophic failures. The comfort with imperfection came gradually. You stopped expecting your makeup to look magazine perfect, stopped comparing yourself to women in advertisements who'd been photographed by professionals and probably retouched. You developed your own standards, your own version of good enough, your own acceptance that your face was yours and your makeup was yours, and together they created something that worked, even when it wasn't flawless. The mistakes taught you more than the successes. They taught you patience, self-forgiveness, the ability to laugh at yourself when you caught your reflection and realized you'd been walking around all morning looking like you'd applied your makeup in a moving vehicle during an earthquake. They taught you that beauty was more forgiving than magazines suggested, that small imperfections didn't actually matter as much as you feared they did, that most people were too concerned with their own appearance to scrutinize yours with the intensity you imagined. There was an unspoken expectation that women would wear makeup. Not wearing it felt like showing up to work in pajamas, technically allowed but socially questionable. Women who preferred bare faces often felt judged, questioned, or encouraged by well-meaning friends and family members who asked, "Are you feeling okay? You look tired." The pressure was invisible but constant, woven into social interactions, workplace dynamics, family expectations, cultural assumptions about feminine presentation. You internalized it so completely that often you couldn't separate your own desires from the external expectations, couldn't determine whether you wanted to wear makeup or simply wanted to avoid the consequences of not wearing it. Going without makeup meant fielding questions, comments, concerned looks. Co-workers asked if you were sick, if you'd slept poorly, if everything was all right at home. The questions were phrased as care, as worry, but they communicated something else. That your bare face was unacceptable, that you looked wrong without cosmetic enhancement, that your natural appearance was concerning rather than neutral. The tired comment was particularly persistent. You look tired became code for, you're not wearing makeup and I've noticed. You could have slept 12 hours, felt energized and alert, arrived at work ready to face the day, but without makeup people would still tell you that you look tired. The equation was clear. Bare female face equals tired. Female face equals unacceptable female face. Some women pushed back against the pressure, deliberately went without makeup as a form of resistance, a refusal to comply with arbitrary beauty standards. They endured the comments, the concerned questions, the subtle and not subtle suggestions that they should put on some lipstick at least. Their resistance was brave, uncomfortable, often isolating. They became known as the woman who doesn't wear makeup, their bare face as a statement whether they intended one or not. Other women compromised, wearing minimal makeup that satisfied social requirements without demanding significant time or effort. A quick swipe of mascara, a bit of lipstick, just enough to signal that they'd made an effort, that they understood the rules even if they didn't fully embrace them. This compromise allowed them to move through the world with less friction, less comment, less constant negotiation about their appearance choices. The pressure intensified in certain contexts. Professional settings demanded makeup more insistently than casual environments. Job, interviews, client meetings, presentations, any situation where you were being evaluated, where your competence might be questioned. These contexts required makeup as part of your armor, your professional costume, your evidence that you took yourself seriously enough to perform femininity correctly. Family events created their own pressures. Holidays, weddings, funerals, any gathering where relatives would see you and have opinions about how you looked. Grandmothers expressed concern if you arrived without makeup. Aunts offered to help you with your face before photographs. Mothers sighed quietly when you refused to wear lipstick to church. The message was consistent. Your bare face was a problem, a concern, something that needed addressing. Dating and relationships added another layer of pressure. Women worried that men who'd only seen them with makeup would be disappointed, even repulsed, by their bare faces. The routine of spending the night with someone new included anxiety about morning faces, about being seen without the enhancement that made you acceptable. Some women woke early to apply makeup before their partner saw them, maintaining the illusion that their enhanced face was their real face, hiding the reality that they looked different without products. The pressure affected younger and younger girls. Teenagers felt it, wanting to wear makeup to fit in, to look older, to participate in the performance of femininity their peers were mastering. Mothers struggled with when to allow it, how much to permit, whether teaching makeup skills was empowering or problematic. The age at which girls started wearing makeup kept dropping, the pressure reaching down to claim new participants, new consumers, new believers in the necessity of enhancement. Some women internalized the pressure so completely that not wearing makeup felt wrong, uncomfortable, like leaving the house without clothes. They couldn't imagine going to the store without at least mascara and lipstick. Their bare faces felt private, intimate, reserved for family and close friends, not for public consumption. The makeup became part of their identity, part of how they recognized themselves, part of who they were in the world. The few social spaces where makeup was optional, truly optional, felt like relief. Late-night gatherings with close friends who didn't care. Early morning walks when you might not see anyone. Lazy Sunday mornings at home when you could exist without performing femininity for anyone. These moments of freedom highlighted how constant the pressure usually was, how rare it felt to exist without it. Men, of course, faced no equivalent pressure. They showed up to work, to events, to dates, to life with their bare faces, and no one questioned it. No one suggested they looked tired. No one implied their natural appearance was insufficient. The asymmetry was obvious but rarely discussed, accepted as just how things were, one more small inequality in the landscape of gender that women navigated daily. The cost of resisting the pressure was social friction, constant low-level resistance, the work of explaining, defending, justifying a choice that shouldn't require explanation. Most women decided the friction wasn't worth it, that putting on makeup was easier than fighting about it, that compliance was less exhausting than resistance. They made their peace with the expectation, found what pleasure they could in the practice, and applied their faces each morning with varying degrees of acceptance and resentment. Advertisements in the 70s sold more than products. They sold ideas about femininity, desirability, success. A lipstick had promised romance, a foundation had promised confidence, an eyeshadow had promised transformation. Women absorbed these messages, consciously or not, and carried them into their daily routines, their self-perceptions, their relationships with their own faces. The advertisements appeared everywhere. Magazines, television, billboards, the backs of buses. They were inescapable, a constant stream of images showing beautiful women using products, looking happy, looking confident, looking loved. The implicit message was clear. Buy this product, and you too can be beautiful, confident, loved. The connection between product and outcome was never proven, never questioned, just endlessly repeated until it became belief. The women in these advertisements were impossibly beautiful, selected for their perfect features, their flawless skin, their photogenic faces. They represented an ideal that existed nowhere in real life, a standard of beauty so elevated that achieving it required not just makeup, but also genetics, professional photography, careful lighting, and probably retouching, though that term wasn't widely used or understood yet. But women compared themselves to these images anyway, found themselves lacking, bought products hoping to close the gap. The language of advertising was aspirational, emotional, designed to create desire and insecurity simultaneously. You're not just buying lipstick, you're buying confidence. This foundation doesn't just cover your skin, it reveals your true beauty. These products don't change you, they help you become who you really are. The logic was circular, nonsensical, but effective. It made makeup feel necessary, transformative, essential to achieving your potential as a woman. Different brands targeted different demographics, different versions of femininity. CoverGirl marketed to young, fresh-faced women with advertisements featuring cheerful models and accessible prices. Revlon aimed for sophistication, glamour, older women with more money to spend. Maybelline positioned itself as reliable, affordable, the brand your mother used. Each brand sold not just products but identities, versions of womanhood you could purchase and perform. The models in advertisements were overwhelmingly white, thin, young, reinforcing a very narrow definition of beauty. Women who didn't fit this mold, women of colour, older women, heavier women, women with disabilities, saw themselves rarely, if ever, in beauty advertising. The message was clear. These products were for a specific kind of woman, And if you weren't that kind of woman, your beauty was questionable, your inclusion uncertain, your right to participate in beauty culture conditional. Celebrity endorsement added authority and aspiration to the advertisements. When a famous actress recommended a particular mascara or lipstick, women believed her, wanted what she was selling, both the product and the implied promise that using these products would make them more like her, more beautiful, more successful, more worthy of attention and love. The before and after format dominated beauty advertising. A woman appeared first looking dull, tired, plain, her natural face presented as a problem. Then she used the product, and the after image showed her transformed, glowing, confident, beautiful. The transformation was dramatic, often achieved through lighting changes, different styling, professional photography, but attributed entirely to the product. Women internalized this narrative. Their before faces were problems, their after faces were solutions, and purchasing products was how they moved from one state to the other. Some advertisements played on fear, insecurity, the anxiety of not measuring up. They suggested that without proper makeup you'd be overlooked, passed over for prettier women, fail to attract or keep a man, miss opportunities for success and happiness. The fear was subtle but effective, creating urgency around purchase decisions, making makeup feel less like optional enhancement and more like necessary protection against being rejected, dismissed, found insufficient. Other advertisements emphasized pleasure, indulgence, treating yourself. Buying makeup was self-care, a small luxury you deserved, a way to feel pampered and special. This approach was gentler, less fear-based, but it still positioned products as necessary for well-being, for happiness, for feeling good about yourself. The assumption remained that women's natural faces weren't quite enough, that enhancement was required, that products were the path to satisfaction. The sheer volume of advertising created a constant background hum of inadequacy. Everywhere you looked, beautiful women using products, promises of transformation, suggestions that your current face wasn't optimal. The repetition worked on you gradually, shaping your beliefs about beauty, about femininity, about what was required to be acceptable, desirable, successful as a woman. You became fluent in the language of beauty advertising without quite realizing it. You could decode the promises, understand what fresh-faced natural glow really meant, recognize the gap between advertisement and reality. But even with that awareness, the messages still affected you, still shaped your choices, still influenced how you felt about your face and what you thought it needed. The advertising industry understood psychology, understood that women's self-esteem was vulnerable, exploitable, profitable. They created needs where none existed, problems where there were only natural variations, solutions that required ongoing purchase. The system was elegant, self-perpetuating, built on the premise that women would continue buying products to fix problems that the advertising itself had convinced them they had. Some women grew skeptical, cynical about beauty advertising, recognizing the manipulation, the impossible standards, the commercial motivations. But skepticism didn't eliminate the influence, didn't make them immune to the constant messages, didn't fully protect them from internalized beliefs about beauty and worth. The advertising had been too pervasive, too early, too consistent throughout their lives to be completely resisted. So tonight, as you settle deeper into your blankets, think about the women who stood at bathroom mirrors in the soft morning light, applying blue eyeshadow with careful hands, getting ready to face their days. They were not performing for history. They were not thinking about how their makeup would look decades later, preserved in photographs that would someday seem both familiar and impossibly distant. They were just getting ready. They were just doing what the world asked of them, what they asked of themselves, what beauty meant in that particular moment. They blended their eyeshadow, they lined their eyes, they applied their frosted lipstick and checked their reflection one last time before walking out the door. And in those small, repeated rituals there was care. Care for themselves, care for the people who would see them, care woven into the quiet maintenance of daily life, the steady work of showing up, of being present, of moving through the world with intention, even when intention looked like 2 circles of blush and a compact of powder carried in a purse. History is not always revolutions and headlines. Sometimes it is a woman at her vanity, her collection of cosmetics lined up like small soldiers, her reflection looking back at her with hope, or resignation, or simple acceptance. Sometimes it is the muscle memory of application, hands that know exactly how to sweep colour across a lid, how to press lips together to distribute lipstick evenly, how to do all of this while thinking about something else entirely, about work or children or the quiet accumulation of an ordinary life. Maybe tonight you carry forward something small from this era. Not the blue eyeshadow, not the frosted lips, but the permission to be bold when boldness serves you. Or the understanding that beauty standards are always shifting, that what feels essential today will feel quaint tomorrow, that you are more than your face and also your face is worthy of care, of attention, of your own gentle regard. Those women did their best with what they had. They made their faces, they made their lives, they moved through their days with courage that looked like lipstick, with strength that looked like getting up and trying again, with grace that looked like simply continuing, and that was enough. That has always been enough. Rest well tonight. Let the memories of frosted lips and bold colours drift around you like old photographs, soft at the edges, warm with time. Let yourself be held by the knowledge that ordinary life, lived with attention and care, is never truly ordinary at all. Good night.